Welcome to today's conversation on middleware presented by Perficient and Red Hat. We have four panelists here with us today. Naden from Red Hat, he's a chief architect and strategist. Charles Mahoney, Perficient's Red Hat practice director. Jason Milliron, director of business development and hybrid cloud at Red Hat. And Ron Merhammer, senior manager of application development solution architects at Red Hat. Naden, I'll pass it on over to you.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Glad to be here. Always proud to not only wear the Red Hat, but also speak to what we represent and why we are the world's largest enterprise software company with an open source development model. And what that means is, you in your daily life, when you fly, when you make a phone call, when you bank, and so on, or visit a healthcare facility, that's more likely than not one of the Fortune 500 companies that we work with who use Red Hat. We are global, and we are the first open source company in the world to really reach that 3 billion mark. But why and how do we do that? So you can go to the next slide, Caitlin. What you're seeing in the upcoming slide is the portfolio for open innovation. So without getting into the details of the products, a very rich portfolio of products, let me talk to why we are the world's largest enterprise software company with an open source development model. What does that mean? We have our engineers be the lead contributors or the catalysts in the open source community where we engage with reason on various open source projects. But then that's a community where it is, passionate contributors where they do what they do because they want to do it, not because they have to do it. So that's how that innovation is continuously fueled. But then if you ask the community as to where is a given project headed, then you may get an answer, well, we don't know. Maybe we don't even care. We love doing what we are doing. So what we do as Red Hat is based on our experience and feeling the pulse and the engagement that we have in the community starting upstream, we bring that into our platform, into the Red Hat platform. It is still open, it is still available, the code is available and so on, but then we harden it, we secure it. There is lifecycle management behind it. We productize it so that when mission critical applications are running, they can trust and they can be assured that it is running on a robust foundation that is secure. That's what Red Hat does. That's why we embrace the open source development model as the world's largest enterprise software company. It all started with Linux. So there are three ways you could unpack the portfolio here. The red box is for the hybrid cloud infrastructure. The black box is where the cloud native development, the middleware, the app services portfolio resides. And then the blue box on the left is all about automation and management. It all started with Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Even today, truth be told, if and when I take an Uber or something, he or she is more likely going to ask, so who do you work for, and so on. And about 6 or 7 times out of 10, when I say I work for Red Hat, they go, oh, the Linux company. And we take great pride in that. But then Linux as a foundation, we have built up on it. Containers are the new Linux. So OpenShift serves as that multi-cloud open platform that where you are able to run your workloads, the modernized workloads on any environment of your choice, including multiple cloud providers, bare metal virtualization, and so on. But then even if you are in the cloud, you need to integrate back to the data. Today's conversation is about middleware. So that's the area where the runtimes, the integration, the process automation, the data services, all of them serve that need. Now, once you are up and operational, or even as you are going through the development process, you need automation. That's where the Ansible automation platform provides agentless, simple ways to automate what is routine in IT. And then you also have products like Insights, which is about proactive remediation. It's not just about predicting what could go wrong, but also being prescriptive about remedial measures. That's the portfolio for open innovation. I will just transition to Charles here with a comment that despite all of the innovative products we have, Red Hat cannot do it alone. We work with partners like Perficient. And over to you, sir, Charles.
Thank you, Naden. As Perficient, we are a global company. As of last year, being on the stock exchange under Perficient, we run about a $600 million run rate with growth over the last year, and especially going into next year across our 25 global locations. We fit within the US offices with a large presence in South America for nearshore development and services, along with India and China for offshore development. So all these sites are owned by Perficient with dedicated solutions and practices for our customers and clients. Go to the next, Caitlin. So within Perficient, we have partnerships with many technology companies, Red Hat being a great partnership that has been worked over many years, last couple of years, especially the last 5 years of experiences. We've worked back and forth with Red Hat, building around OpenShift, building around middleware platforms and transformations. And especially with last year, we were proud to announce and proud to be recognized as the 2020 Application Platform Success Partner of the Year, with our work and dedication to really delivering those platforms and for around the modernization and transformation for our clients, as they move from more of a legacy platforms, legacy solutions into more cloud native and containerized solutions, laying down that foundation and laying down that capabilities of them going forward into the future and enhancing their capabilities, and for not only for their own employees, but for those clients that they serve and work with. With those solutions, we cover have the ability of covering all those gambits, from those microservices and containers to how do you migrate the DevOps, DevSecOps capabilities of your solutions to ensure that consistency and ensure that testing, so that you provide the best solution and the best opportunity for the customers as we go. Next.
All right. Thank you both for those overviews. Let's launch into our middleware discussion. So to start, let's talk a little bit about what modernization is and what it means for customers who want to begin their journey. Nadin, would you like to start?
Sure. Not to start with a cliche term, but I'm going to say it anyway. What modernization is, it depends on who you are. And there are different personas that would look at modernization as, maybe it is a data center modernization. It could be the infrastructure modernization, the servers, doing virtualization, and so on. It is definitely going to the cloud with containers, and that's more likely than not what one thinks about when we are talking about modernization. But there is, I would say, a well-kept secret that may not be that obvious. Really, modernization is about transitioning from the legacy, the traditional way of building applications and deploying them and sustaining them, to a more agile, resilient, and a method, a way by which you can actually react faster and be proactive to market dynamics, to customer experiences, to business requirements, and so on. But modernization is also about modernizing the connective tissue. That's the part that does not get mentioned as frequently. So my overall answer, Caitlin, is that it's really modernizing overall. We should take a holistic approach. And granted, different components will need to get modernized, perhaps in parallel at different times and so on. But let's be very clear that modernization is inclusive of all those components, especially middleware, which is what today's talk is about.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it's not a one and done type solution. It's a journey. It's not a let's just do it and then we're done.
And it is also not, let's just do it for a portion, like, oh, we have modernized the servers and boom, we are done. It's really the full stack the full stack across the enterprise IT, what are the workloads and where are we from a modernization perspective? To take a rough analogy, if you are remodeling the house, imagine if we have to, kind of take a second look at the wiring, the plumbing, and all that. It's not just about painting the walls. It's really about, starting with the foundation, looking at how is the house today. Is the architecture what it should be today, or is it legacy the way it was built 30, 40 years ago? Take your pick.
Yeah, and to build on that, Naden, I think the key is it's a journey, and really modernization never ends. It's not like you go and modernize and you're done. It's you go and modernize a piece of it, and then something else needs modernized, or the next thing, or the next new thing comes out. And I think looking at it, even tying it up higher, ultimately the reason you're looking to modernize is to decrease your costs, grow your revenue, and increase your agility. Like, those are really the three things you're looking to do. And so as you look at where you want to modernize and how to do that, you always have to keep those things in mind. And I think, in today and over the last couple of years, we've seen, I think the big push is modernize to a lot of people means move to the cloud. And that's really what the industry has thought about. And there's a lot of value to moving to the cloud and trying to reduce the cost of having to run and manage your own data center and servers. But as you do that transition, you really have to look at the rest of what you're moving to the cloud. Look at the actual applications and workloads, understand how they work, and understand often you're dragging forward a lot of legacy and a lot of things that were really traditionally monoliths into a cloud, which, to take full advantage of, what you really need to do is look to get and break things down so you can be more agile, drive towards more services, microservices, so that you can go and utilize the cloud as it's meant to be designed, and have lightweight services that you can easily expose via APIs, and then really drive value to ultimately your customers. And so I think a lot of, as you modernize, you have to take a look at those applications and look at the middleware and technologies and frameworks that they're built on, and slowly work through to modernize that aspect as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, well, the call out is really breaking it down and going, the modernization of moving to the cloud is your legacy systems is just moving your problems to another place. You're not really fixing much. You've got to really break it down and understand what you need to do, and taking that piece by piece, modernizing those items to better solutions, more cloud native. You don't just want to move your issue somewhere else and you haven't done anything. You want to ensure that it is a good solution and the best solution for what you're needing to modernize and go forward to.
Yeah, to build up on that, Charles and Ron, I would say it is really, Ron's point about modernization is not just about moving to the cloud. It's not essential that everything needs to go to the cloud either. You could land up going to the cloud for the wrong reasons, or you could land up moving the wrong workloads to the cloud, and so on. So it's really about, I would say, it's coexisting in cloud, possibly multiple clouds, because truth be told, there are some workloads that are better off left as they are for good reason. So it's really a strategic approach to taking the right workloads to the right cloud.
Great. So we've mentioned middleware. Let's talk a little bit more about what middleware is, what it does, and how it fits into this larger modernization picture.
I can jump in with, go ahead. Jason, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, I'll give my 2 cents. So middleware has been around for a long, long time. And essentially what it is it's a set of software that allows you to do things with it, whether that's running applications, whether that's integrating applications with other systems, whether it's automating human workflow. It's kind of the plumbing behind everything that makes your software run and get deployed. And it's evolved heavily over time. So, Ron mentioned earlier the concept of a monolith. Well, monolith is a type of application that runs on middleware, in this case, an application service. But as you look at those monoliths and start wanting to break them down into the microservices or just pieces, your middleware is going to help you do that, and it could be legacy middleware, but it could also be, more state-of-the-art middleware. Whether it's you're moving like messaging from a JMS type broker, so traditional messaging in Java, to something more like Kafka, which is way more cloud native, and how it does things. But essentially, the middleware lets your developers focus on developing without having to think about things like transactions and having to think about things like, what do I do if my application goes down? How do I keep it up and make sure that we have that availability that we need? Historically, middleware is kind of thought through those problems and figured out a way to keep your applications alive and integrated.
Yeah, and to build on that, the question I always ask when I'm trying to define something is, what if I didn't have that? So what if I didn't have middleware? Ultimately, you're going to spend a lot of time building your own middleware, because things like being able to connect to a database and having a data source pool, having thread pools to take in requests, a lot of those core base functionality that comes with something like a web server, an application server, that have really been around for years and years now, is really what the core of middleware is. Middleware has really been the frameworks and the software that has over time been created to solve something, to solve those underlying core functionality that you need to create applications and services. And it's often forgotten because if you have good middleware, oftentimes you don't really think about it, because you're building the applications, you're focusing on the next best thing. But often as you're modernizing, you need to think about what has changed in the space. How is middleware evolving? What are some of the new tools that are coming out? And, as Jason mentioned, things like Kafka, and starting to think about event-driven architectures and different patterns that today are now a lot easier to implement when you start moving to the cloud and have lighter weight services and applications, are often more powerful than they have been historically, and can actually allow you to have a lot more agility and to hopefully be able to scale your applications and decrease your costs. And so as you go and kind of go through that journey, making sure you're modernizing your middleware is really an important piece of that journey.
Yeah, I will add, here is maybe a synopsis of all the fine points that both Jason and Ron made. To me, middleware is basically the connective tissue. And the question comes up, what does it connect? So I can think of three entities at the very least. It connects data, for sure. It connects applications, and it connects processes. And no enterprise can survive without those connection points. And it is just getting magnified in today's world, where there is a proliferation of sensors and controls and edge devices and so on. So there are more and more connection points emerging, and therefore the need for connectivity is, multifold compared to where we were in the past. And I find it ironic, I'll be dating myself, and you go back to the dawn of computers and so on. It all started with data processing, and the need to process data and make sure it is available at the right time for the right folks and with the right context. That has not gone away. We have gone through many various paradigm shifts, but fundamentally, it is ensuring that the right data is available to the right user at the right time. And we cannot even begin to think that can happen without the connective tissue, because it is not possible to take all the data in the world and then just it's just impossible. So data is going to be where it is, and it is middleware's job to make sure it is delivered at the right time to the right place.
Yeah, and really delivering that in a consistent and repeatable manner too. As we look kind of multiple clients that I've been to, as we look at some of those legacy systems, even connecting to databases, connecting to pulling in that data, you look and you can kind of see a transition of different ways of connecting to the same data, different approaches, all within that same application. Really having that connectivity and that connective tissue being a consistent approach, utilizing that middleware to always connect to that data in that same manner. There's no, oh, how did you connect this time versus last time? you know how it was connected, you know that consistency, and it's a reliable solution to do so.
I do have a point to add there, Charles. You made a great point about the consistency, but at the same time, middleware is a fascinating domain where there are choices. It could be messaging, it could be APIs, it could be streaming, and it is not. I wish I could say there is one perfect middleware solution for all the connection needs of the world. Not true. There are different profiles of applications and processes where architecturally one option could make more sense than the other. That said, the need to be consistent in that ecosystem or microcosms of different or segments of different middleware connection points, that's absolutely essential, Charles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's a great point that there's no one size fits all solution for middleware modernization. One customer is going to be needing something that another customer might already have, or have challenges that another customer isn't experiencing. And that kind of leads me into my next question. So, what are some challenges or limitations that you see customers experiencing with their legacy systems and platforms that lead them to middleware as a solution?
I can jump in with, we see, depending on where they are in their journey, to Ron's point earlier, it depends on where some customers, honestly, maybe they just have barely kicked the tires. And so a key challenge that I come across is it is working. There is a connective tissue that is in place between two applications, whatever it is, processes, data, it is working. But we are in a time where there is change. The connection points could change. What if you modernize the application? What's the impact to how is the data delivered to and from that application workload now? And that mechanism can be impacted if an application is retired or it's a different type of application and so on. So the connective tissue needs to be such that by design is agile. It can pivot. It can accommodate different types of workloads on either end. That's a key challenge that we are coming across, Caitlin.
And another challenge, the fact that historically middleware is extremely expensive, especially for closed source or proprietary vendors. And so some of these companies might be using just super legacy middleware from 20 years ago, but it's running the messaging backbone of their corporation. And they might not know the alternatives that they have. So whether that's actually modernizing to something like, again, a new type of messaging stack, or leveraging something like an open source, equivalent, that's where Red Hat really kind of comes in, and where we've kind of started from our middleware story, right? So if you're familiar with JBoss or heard the term JBoss, that's essentially where our history came, is that we were the first open source J2EE application server back in the early 2000s. But like all of our middleware products, they're all open source, and they're great alternatives for a lot of the proprietary options that are in your data centers today. And as you kind of think to modernize and get through some of those challenges, right? You can think about it. If you could reduce the technical spend on what you're paying these vendors, and again, they're very expensive, or they can be, and think forward, how can we reinvest that money, not just to pay less, but what can we do to then innovate with those and take those applications and do what Ron was saying, is like start to modernize them, right? So let's start breaking them down. But all of a sudden, you now have the money that you were leveraging to just keep the kind of middleware lights on, to now to be able to push forward and get true innovation and get some thought leadership with people like Perficient and Red Hat that can help along the way, and have seen this time and time again. Different company.
I want to share an anecdote. In fact, it is happening as we speak. This is the COP26 climate change conference that is going on. Our Red Hat ex-CEO and ex-president of IBM, Jim Whitehurst, keynoted there. And our VP of Open Source Affairs, Michael Tiemann, is the lead on the OS Climate Initiative from a Red Hat perspective. And one of our own chief architects, Vince Caldera, is actually leading the Data Commons platform that brings the data, climate change data together for, in that COP26 conference. And why am I bringing that up? As I was listening to Jim talk about, the role of open source when it comes to data integration, and he was actually talking about standards and so on, and he said, standards evolve. It's not like you have standards on day one, and that's what the collaboration is about. I'm bringing all that because, honestly, Jason, Ron, I'm thinking we are actually, the software company that has an open source integration model too, building up on the open source development model. Otherwise, how can we be there? I mean, that is why we are effective in the data commons platform for climate change to bring in, just imagine the volume of data, the number of data sources. We are not talking just one enterprise. We are talking global, weather patterns and climate data and so on coming together. And the open source approach is absolutely needed there to bring that type of integration together.
Yeah, and ultimately to add on to that, Naden, like I kind of look at like what has really changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And to your point, data is one of them. As we look at the amount of data that's being generated and you look at edge, AI, ML, concepts like that, data has become more and more important. The other things I think that have really changed is the push to be really API focused and API driven. And looking at the cloud, we talked a lot about the cloud already, but you kind of combine those three things, and really a lot of the legacy middleware platforms that were designed 10, 20, 30 years ago, those three things didn't really exist the way they do today. And so trying to carry forward a lot of that legacy middleware that was really focused on a time before those things were important, and trying to move that into the cloud and trying to make it more agile is close to impossible. It's really, really difficult. And so taking a step back and looking at the middleware and tooling and platforms that you have today and saying, maybe where should I go? What are the benefits of moving to something like Red Hat's open source middleware portfolio? What functionality and capability does that drive around being able to better interact with large scale data, being able to be more API first, API driven, being able to expose my services internally or externally to customers. And then also looking at the cloud angle and trying to be more cloud native, being able to take advantage of what the cloud gives us, being able to scale, being able to have more lightweight, flexible, and agile components really helps drive so that your business, as the landscape evolves and changes, you can react to that much more quickly, and you can take an idea and get that into a service or application in hopefully weeks, not years, so that you can really react to your competitors, you can react to the market. And then you can also do things like scale easy. If you go and have lightweight services built on modern middleware, it's much easier to handle your Black Fridays and to be able to react to different times of the year or different events that occur.
Yeah, absolutely. As they go, especially with that scalability and being able to handle all the data coming through. Many customers and clients have gone from maybe terabytes of data that are now sitting at petabytes a year of data coming through and processing. There's the legacy middleware systems and hardware appliances that they've maybe had in place. Becomes a limitation on those guys, and you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time to maintain and keep those up versus the scalability that a more cloud-centric and cloud-native middleware solutions can help provide to really process the amount of data, process the amount of API calls and services that you're moving to.
All right. So what should companies be doing to modernize their middleware? How should they get started? Where do they begin? Because obviously there are so many different ways they can take the next step.
So I'm going to take an example that possibly I'm sure all of us can relate to, and something we use in our personal lives every day. And I'm just talking about the cell phone. And I wish there were one adapter, one charging mechanism, one cable socket that fits into all. And as you know, that's not the case. And companies even choose to change the type of socket, so you're kind of held hostage to the connectors they provide. And to Jason's point, when you look at the applications in the past, even possibly today, they would come in with, here is the best application in the world, and here is the way you connect to us. So they kind of own that proprietary integration mechanism. And customers are they don't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. So they go with a company and they are kind of stuck with how they integrate to other applications. And I am the monolith here. You come and integrate with me and I tell you how to do that. That was kind of the message then. That's exactly what customers should not be doing when they are going for modernization. So at least they should have an aspirational goal of having a universal socket with a universal adapter, at least architecting towards that. And the good news is there are open choices available today that weren't available then. So customers should take a step back and look at what the overall integration strategy is, what's the overall architecture, what are the different integration options, and open should be the keyword that they keep in mind, so that they are not just putting in place into middleware integration for today, but also for the future. So even when it changes, the integration mechanisms still work.
Yeah, and to build on that, I mean, I think it's hard, and so I agree, Don. I think you have to look at open. You need to be preparing for the future, always ready for change. It's hard to say where to start. I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. I think often the answer is it depends, and that's the sales and the consulting answer that anyone's going to give you. But I think what you really have to do is take a hard look at the landscape that you have today. Really look at your applications and services, understand what technologies and middleware that they're built on today, and really focus on the value that you think you can drive. And I think there's, again, kind of two angles of it. What applications are really core to my business, are really important, and that I often change every day. And I really want to drive more agility into those so that I can make those changes, make it easy to make those changes, and focusing on the middleware technologies that they're built on. If they're really pulling you back to be able to do that, I think that's probably what you want to focus on, because that's the heart of your business and that's the value, and hopefully your differentiator. The other angle I think to look, and it's hopefully growing your revenue. The other angle I think is the opposite, which is how do I save money? And so what is the big footprint of middleware I have today? Where are these big, larger applications and monoliths and out-of-date technologies that aren't really built for the cloud? Moving them to the cloud, maybe I get a little bit of a win, but really to get a bigger win and to really drive more optimization of those applications, I need to go and use newer technologies so that they run more efficiently, they have a smaller footprint, they're lighter weight. And so looking to figure out how do I continue to drive down those operating costs of those applications that maybe aren't as core to your business, but you still need. They're still going to be around. You still need them. You can't get rid of them. And so I kind of look at it from different angles and really just take a look at your overall application portfolio and try to see where is those quick wins? Where can I either get a lot more agility quickly, or where can I really drive down cost?
And to add to that as well, as you think about modernizing your middleware, one thing to take in consideration is, when you go to deploy it, you're going to ultimately want like a consistent or the same way to deploy to a public cloud, to your data center, to wherever, just because you're going to want the flexibility to not get locked into wherever that is, right? So historically, installing middleware has been a challenge, right? Because it's, there's no standards. So typically there's a zip file or an executable that you go and run. It's, stands up in some sort of computer, and then you configure it, et cetera. But as you move towards these more agile and cloud native ways of doing things, a lot of that now can be automated, and that's what the cloud provides. But like each public cloud does it a little different, right? And so again, you want to kind of think of how can you, as you're modernizing this middleware, get it to the point where it can be deployed really anywhere, and have that same experience and easily move it. So in case one of the public cloud providers comes into your space, if you're retail or if you're grocery store chain, pharmaceuticals, airline, whatever it is, and if all of a sudden you need to change your cloud direction, you want that to be as seamless as possible. So another thing I always try to think through is, as you're going into the public cloud, to always have that exit strategy as well of, well, what would it take to actually get away and move off of whatever that cloud is to go maybe to either a different cloud, or maybe you're going to bring some of that functionality back into the data center. But just keeping it is kind of cloud agnostic, but cloud ready as possible would be my advice there.
Yeah, because it's getting into that cloud is not always a high expense item, but the removal or the getting off of a particular vendor cloud is a lot of that cost. It's getting your data out of there, removing that, and getting more of a multi-cloud centric capabilities to really get the polyglot cloud or a polycloud solution and multi-cloud solution for that middleware layer. The simpler that you're able to make that middleware layer and work with that can also then enhance the ability of your developers to better utilize and focus on the business avenues and the business development for you. Then really, how do I connect to it? How do I integrate in and draw lines in between the integration and mapping of between those vendors and mapping between different data points, and allowing them to focus on that need, delivering faster to the market and better solutions for you.
Great. All great suggestions and things to think about as companies start their modernization journey. Before we wrap up here, any final thoughts on middleware or tips, tricks, things that you really want people to take away from this conversation?
I will lead in with, I've been staring at this slide as we are talking. There are so many great thoughts that come to mind. And it's interesting, in the industries we serve, healthcare is at the top of the list. And to say that we as a global community have gone through a healthcare challenge, in some respects still going through, is an understatement. But when we think about the patient, when we think about the individual customer walking into a provider facility, the challenge that we have as customers of healthcare is we don't have access to a single source of record that kind of walks through, here is the state of your health. Here is the report card on your health. We have to kind of compile that depending on the number of providers we visit, cardiologist and the optometrist and the general physician, and there is so many different disciplines. And while each one does their job well, the data, wouldn't it be nice if all the data were integrated in such a fashion that the patient has single-click access to that, consolidated? And fundamentally, it is really not a technology challenge because the technology is there. It's partly cultural, but that's where that's a roundabout way, Caitlin, of bringing it back to what can enterprises do? When enterprises are looking at middleware, they should be thinking of that end consumer, not just their direct customer, but the end consumer in the ecosystem that they are in. They should be thinking about not only integrating data within their enterprise, but also bringing it out to the other enterprises to serve the greater good of the world at large, for the citizens of the world. That's how much impact middleware modernized right can have.
Yeah, I think, what I would leave everyone with is, if you're not going through your modernization journey today, start. That's the best thing to do. And really, I think to Naden's point, really look at what does that mean. Ultimately, I think the factors that I look at is like, what is your end customer? What is the value that you're giving them? What is your differentiator as your business? And really focus on how modernization can push that forward and enable that. As well as look at modernization as a journey and continue. It's not something that's going to end tomorrow. It's something you're always going to be going through. There's a new technology that's going to come out next year and the year after that and the year after that make things easier. And that's really what modernization is all about, is trying to move forward, keep your business and keep your technology up to date, so that you can be competitive in your market and really drive the best experience for your customer, patient, whoever you're looking to serve.
Yeah, because if you're not doing that modernization, I guarantee your competitors are, and they will continue going down that path, and it will be a lot harder to catch up, and really deliver to the market as quickly as your competitors may be 6 months from now, a year from now, as they have already started that modernization, already started down that path of decoupling and building in stronger and more cloud native middleware solutions that have then allowed them to keep going forward as those new technologies, as Ron is mentioning, they come out next year, they come out 2 years from now, that having that ability of plugging those in and enhancing those solutions ongoing, it gives them a competitive advantage.
And as you're evaluating your middleware modernization journey, it might be worth asking, as you're digging in, why was this middleware put in place in the first place, and try to tie that back to any historical business objectives or goals. In some cases, maybe it doesn't need to be modernized at all. Maybe it just needs to be retired. But nobody's asking those questions. So definitely kind of reverse engineer. Okay, well, we have this middleware. Why is that? What problem is it solving? Is the business getting the benefit out of it? And if not, then that's good cause to maybe modernizing or moving completely to a different solution. So definitely taking that bigger view picture will help as well.
All right. Well, I think those are all really great things for our customers to think about. Before we end for today, we have 2 key contacts here at Perficient that can get our customers in contact with our experts here and with others. They are our Alliance Manager, Emma Wexler, and our Red Hat Portfolio Specialist, Rob Ernson. So if you have questions, those are your key people to reach out to. And thank you all for attending today.